think you can hopefully see my picture now. There's a short time lag on this programme, so if you ask a question, then there's a sort of 30-second gap before we'll see it and so on. So I'll keep an eye out for questions. The format of today is I'll do a bit of a brief talk about the programmes that we offer, and then I've got two students here who are going to talk about their experience of studying law. And you've got a chance to ask any questions that you have about the programme or about Dundee University or Dundee the city, and you can put those in the Q&A at the side, and we'll keep an eye out for questions, and we'll either answer them in the course of the talks or we'll come to them at the end. I've also got my colleague Dr. Sean Whittaker here, who's also answering questions in the chat and helping out. And we'll come on to our students, Zosha and Lewis, after I've done my talk. Okay, so welcome to virtual Dundee. Unfortunately, we're not back with visitors on campus quite yet, but we're going to be back teaching properly very soon, so that's good. So Dundee, I'm sure you've done a little bit of background browsing and so on, but just to give you a bit of a flavour, we are the smallest of the original 5 law schools in Scotland. So there were, until a few years ago, only 5 law schools. There's now, I think, 10 offering LLBs, but we were one of the traditional ones, but we were the smallest of those. And every year we take in around about 100 people onto the Scots or dual qualifying degree. So that's about 100 people from Scotland that we take into those courses. And then we also usually take around about 60, slightly more this year actually, onto the English and Northern Irish programme. We also take in students onto our accelerated graduate programmes. These are LLBs that last just 2 years. So if you have a degree already in a different subject, doesn't matter which subject, you could come on to do the accelerated law programme at Dundee. So we take in usually about 20 to 30, actually we've taken in nearer 50 this year, accelerated students, and that tends to be a mixture of both, we have that in Scots, so Scots accelerated for people who want to qualify in Scotland, but we also have quite a lot of international students come and do the accelerated programme with us as well. I'll talk a little bit more about these different programmes later on and how they operate. So we're not a massive school. You can get a picture from those numbers that we may be taking about 200 students into first year every year. So I think we're a good size. We're not too big, we're not too small. We are large enough that we offer staff in all the main areas of law that you would expect in a modern law school, but we're not so massive that you're going to get lost in the crowd. So I think we've got a nice sense of community that comes from that. We've got a strong student advising system. I'm sure the students can come to talk more about this later, to support students, especially as they're starting out. You normally have an advisor of studies or personal tutor, as they're sometimes known, who stays with you for the course of your law degree. And they get to know you, and that member of staff probably writes references and things for you, and they're there to help you talk about your career plans, which modules you might want to choose, and so on. We've got a strong student body system and strong student societies to support students. So we'll talk more about that a bit later on as well, but that's been really, really vital, obviously in the last 18 months when things have been quite different in terms of people's learning experience. The teaching staff, I think we've got quite a diverse range of staff. We've got a good healthy mix of people who, like myself, have a background of having practiced law. So I was a solicitor for about 8 years before I became an academic. We've got people who used to be barristers, procurator fiscal, in lots of different jurisdictions, solicitors as well. And we've also got, like my colleague Sean, people who have a more research background, who have PhDs and are the experts in their particular area. So I think we've got a good balance, because obviously law is quite a vocational course, and a lot of people entering law will be thinking that ultimately they want to end up practicing law, but it's also a very rigorous academic subject, so I think we got that balance right. And so people's research informs teaching, and also we're trying to build in the types of practical skills that you'll need if you do go into practice. So we always have very high rankings in teaching quality. So the university's got the TEF, Teaching Excellence Framework, Gold Award for our teaching, and so on. We've also got law staff who've achieved awards for innovation and engagement in teaching, and a really strong research record as well amongst my research colleagues. So we do well in what's called the REF, Research Excellence Framework. And I think as a law school, we've got a close relationship with the profession, both here in Dundee, but also in Scotland and beyond. We've got a lot of alumni from our English and dual qualifying programmes as well throughout the UK and internationally. And I think we have a good connection, and we both it works both ways. So members of staff like myself have appeared in front of government, Scottish Parliament, UK Parliament, and other types of organisations to try and influence the law. And I think that's a good thing. Try and develop the law. It's not just about teaching and learning the law as it is, but it's also about being more active in trying to change the law. And I think that comes into play in teaching as well, because we get students not only to think about what is the law, but what should the law be like. Rankings, I think we need to update one or two of these stats very slightly because we've just had new scores in for, I think, NSS. But generally we're doing really well in the league tables, as do quite a lot of the other Scottish universities as well, tend to do well in the rankings. So Scottish universities are well respected for law, and we've got sort of top 10, or I think we're in the top 15 now for all of the major league tables. And student satisfaction tends to be pretty high for us, and that's important, that we have students that are happy with the degree and the offering and the support that they're given. Our teaching resources, so we have a virtual learning environment. Obviously we've used that an awful lot in the last 18 months while we've had a lot of online teaching. But we've also got a really good modern law library, which has been opened most of the pandemic actually, with sometimes restricted hours, but generally it's managed to stay open. And the law library resources are very often now online anyway. So I shouldn't say this, but you can read cases from your bed, you can read legislation from your sofa. There's not actually that much need to physically visit the library like when I was back when I was a law student. You had to go and photocopy things, but it's a bit different now. So your library access as a student does get you lots of online resources as well. But the law librarians who are physically in the library are really good as well to help with your research, help you find something that you're struggling to find, get an interlibrary loan or things like that. The extracurricular opportunities, I think Zosha is going to talk a little bit later about her experience in mooting. So we have lots of societies that are optional for law students to join, but they're kind of related to studies. So mooting is a good example, and the picture I've got on the slide here is a couple of our students who are taking part in a mock trial. This was the William Bury trial that was actually recorded by Dan Snow's History Hit or something, I think. So Mooting Society we'll talk about a little bit later. There's also the Dundee International Law Society if you're more interested in international law, human rights, that sort of thing. And there's the Bar Society, which isn't about drinking, it's about if you think you want to go into the advocacy route after your law degree. They do sort of talks on advocacy, they get barristers and advocates to come and give talks and training and so on. And I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting about right now that we'll come back to later on. So these are all sort of good parts of the law school. There's also a very strong student presence in decision making about the school. So we've got a staff student liaison committee that meets regularly during term time, and we get a lot of feedback from the student reps about what's going well, what they think could be improved, any issues that are have come up in the teaching, or if they think there's anything, for example, new courses that they'd like us to develop. So we have taken on board things that students have said. For example, students asked for a climate change law module, so that's been introduced. I think Sean teaches part of that. So we do listen to what the students want more of, or things that we could do differently to support them. And the student societies are very influential. Like I say, in the last year, they've been really, really good in especially making new students feel welcome when they couldn't physically be here. So that's been really good and worked as well as it could, I think. And we also have very strong career support. So the career service has someone designated to law, so all the law students can go to the career service, make an appointment. They will do things like go through your CV, help you with any application forms if you're applying for a training contract or an internship, or even just a summer job. And they will do mock interviews if you've got an interview coming up. They'll help you with aptitude tests, all sorts of things. But they've got someone who's dedicated to law, so they kind of know exactly what's going on in the legal sector, what's all the hot questions that the law firms are currently asking, and so on, what are the trends. And I think that's been really useful. They've been online during the pandemic, but they're back both online and physically now as well. Okay, so with the degrees we offer, you might be aware of some of these. We've got a few questions in already, I think, about some of them. There's the English law degree, so we offer a 3-year English law degree, and that is really just the same as what you would get if you studied an LLB south of the border or in Northern Ireland. Exactly the same modules that would be taught, and it's at the moment it's a qualifying degree in terms of it lets you take the next steps towards qualifying as a solicitor or barrister in England and Wales. So after the English LLB here, you could go on to the Bar Professional Training course or the Northern Irish equivalent. I'm going to put a big caveat. At the moment, you can go on from our degree onto the legal practice course. However, that is changing as of Wednesday this week. The route to qualification as a solicitor in England and Wales is changing. So, and this is true wherever you study. Even if you studied in an English university, this would be true. You'd have to go on after your law degree and take what's known as the solicitor's qualifying exam. So if you are thinking about taking an English law degree with a view to qualifying as a solicitor in England and Wales, it would definitely be worth looking up the SQE. I think Sean could maybe pop in the chat a link. We've got a page on our website actually about SQE, which would be worth having a wee read as well. And if you've got questions about it, I'm happy to answer. Okay, so that's the English law route. We also offer a 4-year degree in Scots law. So that's just to qualify in Scotland only. We also, either of these degrees, you can have a languages joint honours, so that's French or Spanish. So you could do English law and French, or you could do Scots law and Spanish by taking the language alongside your law subjects. You possibly might want to combine that with some time abroad, although it's not actually essential to get the language degree that you do spend time abroad, but obviously it's something we would probably encourage you to do if you get the chance. The other thing you can do now, we don't have separate UCAS codes, but you can do a joint degree in English or Scots law with history or with politics. Now, not many people do this, but it certainly is an option. And if you have a query about a particular combination you think you'd like to do, please do get in touch and we'll see whether it's whether we think it's possible. It is subject to timetabling working out. So the way it works is you just do the first 2 years of your law degree as usual, and then in your 3rd and 4th year, and part of your honours subjects, you pick the other subject. So for example, if you were doing Scots law and history, you'd have to do half of your honours modules in history, but actually you could do legal history and that would count is history. So there are ways to kind of do it that aren't so heavy on the other subjects. So that's a possibility, but it's not something that you would choose from the outset. It's something that you would choose as you go into your third and fourth year. Equally, you could do Scots or English law with a specialism in energy law. And again, the only difference that is between a straightforward law degree is that you pick up energy law subjects in your third and fourth year. And yeah, if you do at least half of your subjects in an energy and environmental law, then you would qualify for that specialism, that joint honours. The other 4-year programme we offer is the dual qualifying degree. Now, this is probably our most popular degree for people starting out in law. So a lot of Scots are quite attracted to this. I personally am only Scots qualified, and that's a little bit limiting in some ways. And I did work for 2 large firms that actually did cross-border work. So, you know, there's definitely some advantage in being a Scots lawyer who has the English qualification or English subjects and understanding as well. So it is quite attractive, the dual qualification. Now, obviously the dual qualification is a little bit more crowded because you're having to pick up all of the Scots required subjects, which you do almost all of them in your first 2 years, and then you spend quite a lot of your honours subjects are taken up with the required English core required subjects. So the only disadvantage I would say about doing the dual qualification is you've got fewer honours choices. So you don't get so many subjects to pick from because you're ticking so many different boxes there. But saying that, it is possible to do the dual qualifying law with also a specialism in energy law. Now that it really is quite a packed out curriculum and you don't have very many choices at all, but if you wanted to get the dual and you were interested in energy law, that's a possibility. And I would say just on the energy law point, Dundee's quite unique in offering this. We developed it because we've got really a centre of excellence for energy, mineral and petroleum law, and we've also got a real strength in environmental law, which Sean's thing. So we offer this as a specialism. The other degree, so again, I'm sorry, this is quite complicated, all the different streams here. Finally, as I mentioned just before, we offer the 2-year accelerated graduate course, which is effectively a conversion from a different degree subject into law. So you could take that in Scots law or English law. We don't offer that as a dual qualification, so you can only pick one or the other, and it'd be the jurisdiction that you wanted to practice in eventually. Okay, so I'm not seeing many questions in the chat other than, are the entry requirements to the dual degree higher than the Scots degree? And the answer is no. It's worth looking at our website for the entry requirements. We have what's known as a cap for Scots students, so we can only take in 100-ish students from Scotland who are funded by SAS. And we can either take, we could take 99 in the Scots and 1 in the dual, or I could take 50-50 in the Scots and the dual. It doesn't matter as long as the number for both of them doesn't exceed 100. So there's no difference to us whether you take Scots or dual, so it's not any more or less competitive. You should certainly only pick one of them on your UCAS form because we can very, very easily change you from one to another. And in fact, the dual and the Scots have exactly the same first year and actually first 18 months of the degree. It's only in the second semester of your second year that you'd start taking any English subject if you're doing the dual. So I think that's really good because it means at this moment in time, it doesn't matter which you pick. You can make a more informed choice in your when you're going into your second year, speaking to your advisor, by which time you might have a bit of a better idea where you ultimately might want to practice and what you're more interested in within the legal subjects. So it really doesn't matter which you apply to, and we can switch you very easily between the Scots and the dual qualifying. What I would say though is if you are from outside of Scotland, it's a little bit more complicated. If you're from outside of Scotland and you think you might want to practice in Scotland and the dual is attractive, Once you've started the dual, you start off with the Scottish subject, so it's really, you can't then change easily from the dual to just doing English law, for example. It doesn't shorten your degree course or anything. And it is quite complicated if you start on the English degree to then pick up subjects in the Scots required subjects later if you decide you want to practice in Scotland. It's not impossible, but there are sort of funding issues and things. But I'm happy to speak to anyone who's wanting to know or wanting to think about what might be best for them if they're not entirely sure where they want to practice law. Okay. So if you've got any more questions on these choices, do put them in the chat and we'll pick them up later on. So just on the programme still, we have actually at Dundee taught both the Scots and the English law for over 50 years that we've been in existence. We broke off from St Andrews I think 1967, just over 50 years ago, and we've taught English law from the start, so that's again quite unique. There are, I think, 2 other Scots law schools that offer dual or English law, but they have only started that really recently. And as I say, I think our programme is quite flexible compared to others and what it offers. The important thing is that it does offer this accreditation. I've noted the changes for the SQE, so if you wanted to practice as a solicitor in England, then it's worth just reading up on that, because you will have to, after your LLB, take these extra exams in the solicitor qualifying exams. Okay. Now, that's next, but yeah, just a wee bit about the structure of the programmes. So, as I say, the first year, in fact, year and a half of dual and Scots have exactly the same programmes. You don't get a lot of choice in your first year or second year in terms of modules, especially if you're on the dual, because you're busy taking all the required subjects for the Law Society of Scotland. And then you do, if you're doing the dual, you'll do English criminal law in your second semester of second year. And if you're just doing Scots, you'll get one optional course. So common popular things to do. We've got a legal careers module that's an option. You could take a subject from outside of law, or you could do, I think it's Roman law, or there's law and innovation, which is quite an exciting module that we have on offer. So yeah, that's your kind of choices. Unfortunately, the first 2 years you don't get a lot of choice. The teaching format in the first 2 years are lectures in large groups. The largest lecture group that we have is about 200 in Foundations of Law and Public Law, but in the English stream, maybe up to about 60 people in the lecture, and on the Scots stream about 120 in total, I think. Tutorials are smaller. Tutorials are groups of up to about 20 people, and that's a chance to kind of get practice of things that would come up in an exam, and it's quite often quite realistic. So we'll get you to pretend you're advising a client on a hypothetical problem in a tutorial and go through how you actually deal with legal issues. Okay, so first and second year, if you've got any questions about those, do pop them in the chat. We're going back to face-to-face for tutorials this semester. Lectures are online if they're over 40 people, but we're waiting to see what's happening for semester 2, and obviously hoping that more and more face-to-face will be able to happen. Then finally we get to honours. This is where I think the law degree starts to get a little bit more interesting and exciting, and you can start to do what you're really interested in. Now this slide is a bit busy. I've not actually put everything that I could put on it, but it's got some of the different subjects that we offer at honours level. The only things that really are compulsory are a dissertation, so that is, forget the word limit, is it 12,000 words, I think, dissertation that you write on a subject of your choice with a supervisor. If you don't do the dissertation, you can do an alternative, which is the mooting module. I think Zosha will talk about this because she's going to do the mooting module, so she gets to go to an international competition and prepare for that instead of doing the dissertation, but it's definitely not less work doing that. In fact, it might be more work, but it's certainly a really cool thing to do. We also have a new module called the Applied Law module, Now this is actually just starting running this semester, so I should change that from being developed to about to start. And this is for students who are already doing voluntary work. So for example, if you were volunteering in the Citizens Advice Bureau or similar, or you're taking part in our mediation projects, then you can get credit for doing that. So you write a sort of reflection of what you've learned over your experience. You could also use a placement or paid work for that as well. Mediation, we've got a project with Dundee Sheriff Court where students can get trained up as mediators. And mediation it's not yoga, it's not it's about alternate dispute resolution. So getting parties to kind of come to an agreement about the outcome of a case. So we go to the Sheriff Court. The Sheriff Court identifies cases where the two parties are in dispute and they could perhaps benefit from mediation. If the parties agree, then they go to mediation together, and we have members of staff who are trained as mediators, but we also get students to train up as mediators and go along with staff and go through the mediation process and try and get the parties to come to an agreement. And there's a really strong success rate in doing that. And it's really good experience for students, and it builds the soft skills, and it's seen as the next big thing in litigation, really, and it avoids a lot of time and costs for clients, for the parties. It's good for the court because it deals with their business quicker, and it's really, as I say, good experience. So that's an exciting project, and we've got a new mediation theory module as well, just starting this semester. So that's the kind of more clinical experiences you could get. The rest of the modules on here are a little bit more traditional, and it's kind of we'll give you a long reading list, and then you'll go away and read it, and then go to class and we'll talk about it. So just to flag a few of them, so we've got a range of things: international criminal, international law, human rights, criminal procedure, forensic medicine. We've also got new modules in forensic science and digital evidence as well. Various energy and environmental law options, and then quite a few more sort of commercial law options. This is my bag. I teach tax law, which I promise tax law is much more exciting than it sounds, but also intellectual property, employment law, other things. Or you could start taking subjects from the MA, like history or politics, either just as a one-off, or if you did enough of them, you could do a joint degree with, say, Scots law or English law and politics or history, for example. Okay, so if anyone has any questions about the honours options or anything you're wondering if we do it, then do just pop it in the chat. But I think we've got a good range of honours options there. There is a bit of an emphasis, as I've said, on real life learning, because law for most people is kind of a vocational degree that they might want to go and eventually and be solicitors. So yeah, I've mentioned problem-based learning and tutorials. In your first year, normally we have a moot. I'll get Zosha to talk about mooting in a second. Mooting Society, these new modules in applied learning and mediation. We have students who do street law as well, which is the Law Society's programme, which gets students going out to schools and teaching law. And if you do street law, you can also get credits for the applied learning module. And we have a lot of students who are involved with the union, the Students' Association and the union as well. And that is me. I've run over time, I'm afraid, but we'll go over to our students and have time for questions. I'll just, if you want to take a note of my email, I'll put it in the chat as well. If anyone's got any particular questions that they'd rather email me, or if you think about things afterwards as well. So that's great. So I'm going to pass over now to Zosha, who's going to talk about what it actually is like to be a law student.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, so Yvonne kind of asked me to describe a typical week in the life of a law student and generally describe my experience at Dundee. And I'll just start off by saying that I've loved my time here. I've met so many great people. The lectures are fantastic, the quality of teaching is great, and what really makes it is the city and the people and how friendly and welcoming it is. So I would genuinely recommend studying here. And in terms of a typical week, It varies a lot depending on what year you're in. Typically in your first year, you'll start off with a lot of classes and a lot of contact time. So you'll sit in lectures and then you'll sit in tutorials. But the further you go through your degree, the more that contact time decreases and the more time you have to study independently and to go away and do reading and do your own kind of preparation work. So last year was my 3rd year of uni. I'm in the Scots law stream and I'm just going into my 4th year now. And in a typical week, I'd have about 3 lectures and a couple of seminars. But the lower contact hours don't mean that you just get to skive. You do have to kind of manage your own time, fit in your reading, fit in your preparation work. But the advantage is that you get to work whenever you want. So you don't have to rock up at 9 AM on a Monday to a lecture theatre. You can work in ways that suit you and your schedule. So personally, I prefer working later in the evening and I prefer working from home and not in the library, although the library here is very, very good as well with great facilities. So yeah, the key is staying super organised. I'm personally a lover of planners, calendars, to-do lists, all that sort of thing, but you get a lot of scope to decide how you want to learn. And it's nothing you haven't done already in revising for exams in high school, so it's nothing to be kind of daunted by. Then generally around the first semester, a lot of my time has been taken up by applying to things. There's so many opportunities available to you right from the first day of uni. Things like open days, networking events, careers fairs, training contracts a bit later on, or even paid insight schemes during the summer. And so you do have to apply for these, and applications do take quite a bit of time. But it is really, really worthwhile. And I've actually just got a job out of doing one of those in first year and kind of progressing with that firm throughout my time at university. So fully do your research and take that time to fill out these applications. And there are actually some networking events and things where you can get free drinks and free snacks. So there's perks along the road as well. And like a lot of you probably will, I have also worked at part-time jobs alongside academics at uni. Dundee has so many bars, restaurants, shops and places that can employ you. I actually worked for DUSA, which is the student union at Dundee. It's a fantastic student union. I think it's the best in Scotland officially by some statistics, but I couldn't recommend working for them more. They pay really well, they kind of understand your student and uni commitments, and you get your summers off, which is a plus as well. And as Yvonne mentioned, there are so many societies and the social scene in Dundee is really great. So apart from the great clubs and things, you'll have societies for every interest imaginable, from like hiking to athletics to Harry Potter to, I think there's like a tea society or something random. So there's genuinely something for everybody. And you can, again, as Yvonne mentioned, do societies within your own course as well. I'd recommend probably doing a bit of both so that you do meet people out with your degree, but the society that I am most involved with is the Mooting Society. So mooting is basically just a fancy word for legal debate. It's kind of like mock court, except there's no witnesses, there's not that much kind of American shouty arguing, it's more debating on the merits of a legal question. And it is actually very enjoyable. So you get put with a teammate of sometimes bigger teams, sometimes smaller teams, and you have to debate against another side on this legal issue. And the Mooting Society here are really well ranked and they can put you forward for competitions across the country. So I've debated against different universities in the Oxford University Press competition, the Alexander Stone competition, and this year the Inner Temple competition. And this is all stuff to put on your CV, and it teaches you skills that are applicable kind of in future legal work, but also during your degree, because as Yvonne mentioned, there was actually a moot as part of your foundations module in first year. So it's great practice, you meet loads of people, your CV looks fabulous. And again, there is this opportunity to do a moot instead of a dissertation in your fourth year. I am lucky enough to have been put forward for that this coming year. So it'll be a lot of work, but surely very, very rewarding. And yeah, securing my place on the Telders team was definitely helped by getting in early and practicing moots and competing in the internals and the externals. And genuinely don't worry if you've never spoken in public in your life, because the Society also puts on very regular training sessions for everybody and gets you up to speed. So yeah, I don't know how much time I have, but that's kind of an overview.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Soja. And in fact, I think I can try and share a photo of you in action doing a moot. So let's see if this works, if it lets me. Yeah, so hopefully that's popped on. We look at our moot courtroom as well, which we use for mooting and teaching. So yeah, looking forward to being back on campus and using our facilities. Well, I would say this year actually, Mooting Society has really adapted to the online mooting and everything, which is actually realistic because it's what the real courts and litigators have had to do in the last year. So it's actually been more realistic than you might think. But that's great. So if anyone has any questions about mooting or honours options and things, do pop them in the chat. So I'm going to pass over now to Lewis, and he's going to talk about his experience of studying law so far. Lewis?
Thanks, Yvonne. As already mentioned, my name is Lewis. I'll be entering my final years of studying on the English stream. I did choose that over dual qualifying as I always sort of knew I wanted to practice in England. And I would sort of suggest if you've already got that intention, I would probably choose either Scotland or England, because it can quite often sort of limit what you want to do in terms of honours, as Yvonne's already said. After this, I am looking forward to furthering my studies, hopefully in either intellectual property law or commercial law. Much of my time is now composed of seminars, and as Zosha has also said, it doesn't necessarily mean you're working less, it just means more of it is away from the traditional way of learning, but personally I prefer that. Dundee as the city is a great place. It sort of mimics the law school in the fact that it is quite a small city. It's got a good sense of community. For those similar to me, I grew up in quite a quiet background. So coming to Dundee gave the feeling of a big town rather than an overwhelming city where I felt lost at sea. That's not to say it's not quiet. On a weekend, pubs are full, clubs are full. And even through the week, very often you'll find pubs are very busy. Adding to this, Dundee is quite a central hub for the entirety of Scotland. So you're never more than sort of 2-3 hours away from basically anywhere you want to go in Scotland. But like I said, the real sense of community can be felt almost immediately on coming to Dundee. The main reason I enjoy being in Dundee is obviously being at the law school. The first week of law school, for me personally, I did feel quite intimidated. You know, you're at this big university with quite high prestigious rankings and you just think, what am I doing here? I don't belong. But the staff understand that everyone's like this, and the course is very much catered to helping you along the way. This university, again, as Yvonne sort of said earlier, it has a much larger emphasis on relationships between the lecturers and the students. This isn't something you necessarily feel at all universities, and this extrapolates through all the staff, tutors and students. Everyone's willing to help you if you need it. Many of the universities I visited when I was deciding was much more what your grades are going to do for the university, whereas Dundee itself seems to be much more what the university can do to help you get the best grades and set you up in the best possible stead. And that's something that I think is really important when deciding what the university you want to go to. One of the best things about studying law generally is that because it's such a broad area, I mean, you saw how many options there was at the honours level. You will pick up things that you wouldn't necessarily think you'd enjoy, but they turn out to be fantastic. I mean, Yvonne said about taxation law. It does sound a lot more interesting than it originally you'd expect it to be. For me, I really enjoy public law. That's quite a weird thing to say, because if you'd have asked me that at the start of my degree, I'd never thought that. But I give large credit to the lecturers in public law for that. The step up in university can be quite drastic. But again, law school have created an environment that sort of accommodates the struggle that you're going to go through. And they're with you every step of the way. As the advisors of studies are always willing to talk if you need to talk. That might be even just a reply to an email. But doesn't necessarily need to be that. If I look back at the start of my degree to where I am now, you sort of realise how far you've progressed in your education without really realising it. And if you ever do struggle, lecturers are always going to listen to you and help you. Personally, I do enjoy the challenge of law school, and it is incredibly rewarding when you get a high grade, because you know you're at this difficult degree in a difficult and high-ranking university, and you just feel so overwhelmed with sort of that you've earned this grade. As Yvonne said, most of the first year things will be away from campus and distance learning. You've probably heard quite a few horror stories about them, but after a couple of introduction weeks, you don't really notice a massive difference. You know, for me personally, I gained quite a lot of confidence speaking behind the camera because you've got all eyes on you, and some good things have come out of it. I believe the way the assessments have been done have changed because of being away from the old traditional way of doing it, where you were sat in a hall, you just jotted everything down that you remember. It's much more now what it would be like in real life. You get a paper, you take it away, you expand on what you've already learned and further the knowledge. But for me personally, that's a much better way of learning. And I'm aware most of what I've spoken about is academic, but it's not all academic. Like has been said, there's so many societies and clubs that will be available for everyone on Freshers' Fair, and as well as many law societies. This year I'm the external coordinator for the Mooting Society, so again, it's my job to make sure that we're always signed up for all the competitions. I help the external team whenever they need it, and just basically help wherever I need to help people. And if you ever get the chance to be on a committee, it's a fantastic thing to put on your CV. And yeah, it's a little bit more work, but you're not having to worry too much about how much work you've got. At the end of the day, it's a student-run committee. Everyone knows that you've got more important things. Your studies always come first. The final thing I have to say really is just about Dundee as a campus. That is a very helpful thing for first years. Everyone's in the same boat as you, and it makes it much easier to find friends, in my opinion. As well as having a campus, everything you need as a first year pretty much is on the campus. So Dundee specifically, there's a gym, there's a nightclub, there's bars, there's a cafe, shops, library, as well as chaplaincy centre. So you're never really alone, and there's so many things to do. You never have to worry about that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And if you do have any questions about sort of life as a student, don't be afraid to just put them in the chat.
That's super. Thank you, Lewis. I think between you covered all the things that people might want to know, because there's no questions popped in, which is, we must have covered everything. So thank you. And you make a really good point, Lewis, about assessments. So obviously, as Lewis said, we've not been able to force everyone into an exam hall and get a memory test. So actually, I think that's been one benefit, is changing the form of assessments to more things like 24-hour exams, multiple choice in first year, and then sort of more assignments, more realistic things, and open book exams, which is much more like practice. So, and I think we really are keen, we've been taking feedback from the students about what they would want to keep, even when we can go back to more normality in terms of exams. And I think that's something we will definitely respond to, and keep what's worked well. So that's great. I think we've got about a minute left, so we might just wrap up there. But thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much to Lewis and Zosha especially for giving up their time today to talk to you about what it's like being a student. Thank you everyone for attending. If you've got any final questions, do pop them in the chat or drop me an email if it's something complicated or you think about afterwards. But thank you very much for attending. We're going to stay live. I think we've got another session starting at 6, which is effectively the same session. So there's not much point in listening to it again, staying around and hearing the same thing again. But thank you so much.